Mangwana ni malelepo vukenjani kwaswana we Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening in the SADC region and beyond. Today is Tuesday, the 26th of October, and as usual, you're joined by Ashwin Berry and Aina Raiza Kweyo.
Today is also International Bandana Day. When I say bandana, you say cancer, right? On any other day of the year, bandanas conjure up thoughts and punks on the streets or pirates and ninjas, but on International Bandana Day, people all over the world ascribe special significance to wearing a bandana. If we can get serious for a minute, in 2012, 14.1 million new cases of cancer occurred all over the world. And here is more on International Bandana Day. Welcome back, and here are the news making headlines. Sudan's military dissolves civilian government and arrests leaders. Sudan's military has dissolved civilian rule, arrested political leaders, and declared a state of emergency. General Abdel Fattah Burhan, who had been heading a joint council with civilian leaders, blamed political infighting. Military and civilian leaders have been at odds since long-time rule Omar al-Bashir was overthrown 2 years ago and a transitional government was set up. Minister Abdallah Hamdok is among those reported to have been put under house arrest, along with members of his cabinet and other civilian leaders. A statement from the Information Ministry on Facebook said those arrested were being held in unidentified locations. It is also said that Master Hamdok was being pressed to support a coup but was refusing to do so, and he urged people to continue with peaceful protests to defend the revolution.
Islamic State claims responsibility for bomb attack in Uganda. Islamic State claimed responsibility for a bomb attack that killed at least one person in Uganda's capital, Kampala, on Saturday night. The group said that some of its members detonated an explosive device in a bar where members and spies of the Crusader Ugandan government were gathering in Kampala on Sunday. The bomb, packed with nails and shrapnel, targeted a pork restaurant on the outskirts of the capital, police said on Sunday. Information gathered indicated that 3 men disguised as customers visited the restaurant, placed a polythene bag under a table, and left moments before the explosion, police said. Now, President Yoweri Museveni said the attack seems to be a terrorist act. In 2010, the Somali Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab killed dozens of people in Kampala in a bomb attack, saying it was punishing Uganda for deploying troops in Somalia.
Army launches airstrike outside Tigray capital. The Ethiopian military on Sunday carried out airstrikes on 2 rebel-held towns in northern and western Tigray. The ongoing aerial offensive campaigns are aimed at weakening Tigray forces. Ethiopia government spokesperson Selamawit Kasa said that Sunday's air raids targeted a training and military command post of the Tigrayan rebel group Tigray People's Liberation Front in Maiteberi town and Western Front. A second raid struck the historic Adwa town where Al-Medi textile factory was targeted. Selamawit said the same mission destroyed destroyed a separate facility in the northern town of Adwa, which was used to manufacture military equipment as well as fake military uniforms used by the TPLF combats. Rebel spokesperson Getachew Reda on Sunday confirmed the fresh airstrikes but said the raids did not target the military. Abiy Ahmed's Air Force did target a local hospital in Mai Tsaberi. TPLF accuses the government of targeting civilians on allegation Addis Ababa denies.
Mali tells UN election date will be confirmed after December talks. Mali's interim authorities will confirm a date for post-coup elections after national reform consultations in December, a representative of a UN Security Council delegation said after talks on Sunday. The timeline is a further sign that Mali's military leadership is likely to extend an 18-month transition to constitutional rule that it originally promised would culminate in presidential and legislative elections on 27 February 2022. Niger's UN ambassador Abdul Abari said they were told the national reform talks in December would agree to an electoral schedule that would be announced soon afterward. While we cannot object to the reforms, we should not delay the end of the transition, Abari told a news conference.
Climate change has already hit Southern Africa. Here is how we know. Many people still think climate change is a phenomenon that will only face in the distant future. But it is important to realize that we are already experiencing climate change and have done so for some time now. There is no avoiding the reality that Southern Africa is in the throes of climate emergency. By identifying trends in the frequency of weather events happening and its intensity over a period of decades and exploring changes in related biological system in light of this. It's plain to see that the region has already been rocked by climate change and related effects. In Southern Africa, there has been an increase in severity and frequency of heat wave events over the decade. Over recent decades, drought is defined as a significant and prolonged departure from mean rainfall totals. The most severe and best-known drought in Southern Africa in the recent years was the Day Zero crisis in Cape Town. Over recent decades, tropical cyclones in the southwest Indian Ocean have increased in intensity. The first Category 5 tropical cyclone for the sub-ocean basin was recorded in 1994.
Church calls for referendum on abortion in Namibia. The Alliance of Christian Churches in Namibia has suggested government hold a referendum over the contentious issue of abortion. Reverend Dolly Nengushe, who is the executive chairperson of the ACCN Board of Trustees, believes the process of a referendum will help gauge the views of all parties involved. The ACCN, during a media briefing last week, firmly rejected a proposal to allow abortion and repeal the Abortion and Sterilization Act of 1975, which was adopted under apartheid South African rule. In principle, the alliance said it was not opposing amendments as long as the changes do not give a license to kill the unborn and tear down the family unit.
In our next story, why Kenyan churches are banning politicians from pulpits. Kenyan churchgoers have been used to smartly dressed politicians rolling up in flash cars to attend services on Sunday, often with cameras in tow. Now leaders of the established church have had enough. They have banned politicians from the pulpit, accusing them of making divisive and undefying remarks that desecrate the church. In order to reduce media attention, the church will no longer disclose the amounts donated by politicians towards church projects. Partly, priests are to blame for the capture of the church by politicians. There was need to return to practice into its purity. Catholic Archbishop Anthony Muheria explained to BBC. The head of the Anglican Church in Kenya, Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit, occurred that it was a mistake to give leeway to politicians in church in the first place. The pandemic has made it difficult for churches to raise money as congregations were banned for more than a year. The faith economy is a big business, and a fundraiser with the right politician can greatly improve the fortunes of the church.
Faith economy. Another two words you don't usually see next to each other. In our next story, South Sudan floods are affecting 700,000. The worst flooding that parts of South Sudan have seen in 60 years now surrounds his home of mud and grass. His field of sorghum, which fed his family, is underwater. Surrounding mud dikes have collapsed. Other people have fled. Only Yao Agua Deng's family and a few neighbors remain. This is the third straight year of extreme flooding in South Sudan, further imperiling the livelihoods of many of the 11 million people in the world's youngest country. This state is usually spared from extreme flooding that plagues the South Sudanese states of Jonglei and Unity that border the White Nile and the Sad marshlands, but now houses and crops have been swamped. In these rural communities, shelters of braided grass put up fragile resistance in a land of seemingly endless water. Floods are not constant. Some people will stay and some will go, said Thomas Mapo, a 45-year-old father of 9, as he showed off the destroyed houses of his village. But me, I cannot move anywhere. There is no other place I know.
In our next story, critical roles lies ahead of South Africa's new Chief of Justice. Most African constitutions for the past 30 years, led by an independent Namibia in 1990 and strongly endorsed by South Africa in 1994, have authorized the Apex Court to determine the limits of government under law. This is naturally consistent with both the rule of law and the separation of powers doctrine. South Africa finds itself at a critical juncture. Chief Justice Mogoeng's 10-year term had just ended. President Cyril Ramaphosa has belatedly initiated the search for his successor. As a qualified lawyer, Ramaphosa will now know how important the appointment is, particularly as the court faces an unprecedented level of animosity from those who seek to rule by abuse of power and corrupt practice. And because the criminal justice system is tottering due to ineffective policing, a hollowed out prosecuting authority, and a climate of impunity in many quarters, the Constitution authorizes the President to appoint a Chief Justice after consulting the Judicial Commission and the leaders of all political parties in the National Assembly. This means he must consult in good faith, but is not bound by any advice given. A strong, courageous, and dedicated Chief Justice will provide leadership desperately needed to turn the administration of justice around. The appointment of anyone who does not have the qualities in abundance is likely further to erode the rule of law as a fundamental cornerstone of South African democracy.
Africa urged to wake up to growing state surveillance threat. African governments are using new technology and laws to increase surveillance of opposition figures, researchers warned. Existing laws have largely failed to stop state surveillance across the continent. From monitoring academics in Egypt to tracking journalists in South Africa, the African Digital Rights Network think tank said in a report. Citizens need to be more aware of their privacy rights and of the surveillance activities undertaken by their governments, said Tony Roberts, a research fellow at the Institute of Development Studies think tank who edited the report. Although mass surveillance is an increasing global problem, the report's authors said the threat is more severe in fragile democracies with weak legal oversight and low levels of public awareness. They called for legal reforms, stiff penalties for illegal surveillance, a ban on the sale of surveillance technology to states proven to be violating privacy rights, and greater public awareness to hold government to account.
Two men due in court for allegedly abducting 11 Ethiopian nationals. Two men are expected to appear in Orlando Magistrate in Johannesburg today on charges of kidnapping and extortion following their arrest over the weekend for allegedly abducting 11 Ethiopian nationals. The suspects, who have been identified by the police as Ethiopians, were apprehended guarding a storage facility in Hennessy Street in Meadowland, where the victims were found and rescued by the police officials. Public spokesperson Andre Trott said unrelenting efforts of the Western Cape detectives to fight extortion in the province led to the arrest of the suspects in Meadowlands on Saturday morning. After their court appearance in Gauteng, the two suspects are said to be transported back to the Western Cape, where they will appear in court once again for their respective roles in the kidnapping and extortion syndicate.
Somalia's Grave Digger's Wife grabs top prize as Best Film Music at FESPACO. The Grave Digger's Wife from Somali director Ahmad Kadar grabbed the Golden Stallion of Yenenga on Saturday night for Best Picture, while homegrown Burkinabe documentary Night Nursery was named Best Documentary at the 27th edition of FESPACO. For Best Picture Silver Stallion, second place, Jessica Genius of Haiti won for Frida. Third place went to Tunisian director Leila Bouzid for A Tale of Love and Desire. Dramas dominated the feature film category with a notable exception. The comedy Les Trois Lascars by Burkinabe director Boubacar Diallo had audiences rolling in their seats. A number of films were previously shown at this year's Cannes Film Festival, notable among them being The Grave Digger's Wife by Somalian director Kadar Ayederas Ahmed. All right, that brings us to the end of our top stories. We still have more news for you here on Africa. Good morning. See you after the break.
Strike it gold and win 5,000 Namibian dollars in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another 10,000 Namibian dollars by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. Namibia last week held a historic public hearing with the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Social Development and Family Affairs on the legalization and non-legalization of abortion in the country. Namibian activist Ethne Marge puts the issue in the Southern African perspective. The infographics used during this interview are courtesy of Guttmacher Institute. And here's more.
We're joined by gender activist Ethne Mudge, all the way from South Africa tonight. Thank you for joining us, Ethne.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Ethne, now, this interview is all about the massive discussion we had in Namibia last week, a very historic one around the legalization of abortion or not. But we want to talk about it a little bit more in a generic and in a Southern African context. So in your opinion, how does the right to access a safe abortion and choosing whether or not to do so link to human rights and women's rights?
Yeah, that's a great question. The thing about this law that we have in the country at the moment is actually that it goes against the rule of law itself. So on a basic level, every law is supposed to actually do what it sets out to do. And we know from study after study in country after country that in fact, this law does not decrease the amount of abortions. The same people would still go and have an abortion. They'll just resort to unsafe abortions. Which makes this law illegitimate. But there's a second reason why it's illegitimate, and that is that laws are not supposed to harm us. And in fact, this law increases the prevalence of unsafe and lethal abortions, which means this law actually harms us and the state's not allowed to hurt us. So those are two reasons why the law itself is illegitimate and doesn't meet the minimum standards of the rule of law. But when it comes to rights, it's very obvious that when you force a person to incubate an unwanted fetus, you're doing massive harm to their dignity and their bodily autonomy. But the fact is the majority of people, as suggested by your question, rightfully so, who are harmed and killed by this law are women and children. And we simply aren't the type of country that stands up for discrimination. We're the type of country that believes proudly in equality and proudly even in equity. So this discriminatory law really needs to go, and it's time to make a stand for that.
The issue of a pro-choice, pro-abortion, etc. It's not just a Namibian issue, or for that matter, an African issue. It's a global issue. But if we bring it a little bit closer to home, what is the reality on the ground in Namibia and Southern Africa in terms of women accessing unsafe abortions, and what risks do they face?
That's a great question. It reminds me of the hearings we had a week ago in which we were shown a graph of the rates of unsafe abortions and how drastically it dropped in South Africa the minute that abortion was legalized. And the reality is that in the region, about 9% of maternal deaths are due to unsafe abortions. So if you put that into Namibian context, that means we lose 500 lives annually in Namibia due to unsafe abortions, which is a staggering amount to imagine. But that's not only death as a result of our current abortion law, but what about the more than 3,500 schoolgirls who fell pregnant this year alone? And then with far more than 2,000 of them dropping out as a result. So that's an entire school's worth of children whose futures are stolen forever. And we're just not okay with that.
Namibia, of course, is in the region, and a very small part of the countries in the region actually allows abortion according to the law. In your opinion, how far have we progressed, or how willing are our lawmakers and our citizens to turn this around?
I mean, globally, there's been a trend to restrict people's rights. And Namibia is no exception in this. But Namibia has always had the strength to do what's right, even when it's unpopular. Our independence was a sign of fighting in the face of global pressure against us. We don't tolerate discrimination just because everyone else does. We're the land of the brave. But not only that, regionally, we have examples to follow. South Africa's one. Benin has recently had a massive victory in terms of abortion rights. Other comparable countries like Brazil has been fighting this fight for years and has made massive strides as recently as the last few years. So we can take courage from those around us, but we can also take courage from our past and our history of doing the right thing in the face of global pressure against us.
Ethne, just to wrap up the interview, although we can talk about it for hours, obviously, data always helps when one drives an issue. Now, in terms of studies, what does that show in terms of illegal abortions in country that restrict or ban access to safe and legal abortions?
Absolutely. So like I said, it's very clear in study after study after study, there's no contradiction here. It's very unambiguous. Country after country after country. When you restrict abortions, abortion rates do not drop. when you restrict abortions, the rates of unsafe abortions go much, much higher. When you relax abortion restrictions and you make abortions legal, those unsafe abortions drop dramatically. You're directly saving lives. And I mean, I can only demonstrate again the 9% of maternal deaths in our region, you know, but the fact is, data is hard to come by because of the fact that people hide this, but just the data our own ministries provided us, the Ministry of Education last week, the Ministry of Health last week, the Ministry of Justice last week, they all provided information that shows very unambiguously how much harm there is in this country as a result of this law. So the data is actually staggering, and one doesn't know where to begin. It's a long, long, long list, and it all points to the same facts.
Effie, thank you very, very much for joining us and for having the courage to stand up and speak out. We wish you the best with your future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now, President Emmerson Mnangagwa's legitimacy as leader of both the country and the ZANU-PF party has been challenged at the High Court by a party member. To get into this story as briefly as possible from Zimbabwe, please welcome Talent Gore. How are you, Talent?
I'm good. How are you, Ashwin?
Take it away.
So apparently there is a ZANU-PF youth member who is challenging the legitimacy of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. The legitimacy of President Emmerson Mnangagwa as the president of the country and also as the ZANU-PF party leader. Stalbert Msengesi is claiming that what President Mnangagwa did, or the way that he rose to power in 2017, was illegal. He said that President Emmerson Mnangagwa rose to power when the late former president Mugabe was capacitated. He said that the president claims that he was incapacitated, but that is wrong. He was capacitated as he is actually facilitated for the graduation ceremony on that particular day that he later resigned during the day. So he's saying that the way he rose to power was illegal, and he has since challenged the legitimacy of President Mnangagwa at the High Court. The matter is still yet to be heard in the courts.
Okay.
All right. Now, Zimbabwe is commemorating SADC Anti-Sanctions Day. Please tell us more.
Thousands of Zimbabweans yesterday commemorated the SADC Anti-Sanctions Day. Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for 2 decades now. We were put under sanctions in the early 2000s due to the land reform program, whereby the country took back the land that the white minority farmers had taken from Zimbabwe. So ever since then, we have been under sanctions. So yesterday, there were commemorations throughout the country whereby people were marching against sanctions. They were calling for the removal of sanctions. We also saw that the SADC chairperson, the president of Malawi, Lazarus Chakwera, also called for the removal of sanctions. But however, the United States Embassy in Zimbabwe and the UK, the British Embassy in Zimbabwe, accused President Emmerson Mnangagwa of hiding behind a finger, accusing President Emmerson Mnangagwa of hiding behind the finger and claiming that sanctions, they are not causing anything in Zimbabwe, but rather they were targeted at certain individuals. So sanctions, they had nothing to do with the Zimbabwean economy, but rather they were targeted at certain individuals.
All right. Now, unsurprising, ZANU-PF is plotting fresh constitutional amendments that would allow President Emerson Mnangagwa to serve more terms after 2023 elections. Unsurprising because you've touched on this before, but do expand.
Yes. So under the provisions of the 2013 constitution, if President Mnangagwa wins the 2023 elections, he has to rule till 2025. You have 5 more years in office. But the ZANU-PF has since proposed that the constitution be amended so that President Emerson Mnangagwa can be the sole candidate in the upcoming polls and beyond. They are saying that they want his term in office not to expire. They don't want his term in office to expire. So they are rooting for the amendment of the constitution. We have seen that the ZANU-PF has already agreed to this amendment of the constitution to make sure that President Emerson Mnangagwa be the president and that his term does not expire after 5 years.
Thank you very much for bringing us the news from Zimbabwe Talent.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
It's always good having you on Africa Good Morning. Something else that's always good to have is good weather. So let's check out the forecast up next.
Martin Dlamini, the editor of the newspaper Times of Eswatini, talks about the uprising in Africa's last monarchy. The protests escalated in May this year when protesters took to the streets to denounce police brutality in the aftermath of the death of the 25-year-old university student Tabani Komonye, widely believed to have been killed by traffic police officer. Now, Martin Dlamini spoke to Jemima Biekas.
The situation in Eswatini is one of relative calm, but we are expecting today to see a march organized by the multi-stakeholder forum comprising of political party organizations and human rights groups, as well as the Trade Union Congress of Swaziland to COSWA members, to Parliament to deliver a petition to address the ongoing political impasse in the country. This comes after weeks and months of protests, which actually began way back in May and prompted by the death of a student in a car accident. His body had not been found for several days, and police were suspected to have removed him from the car, taken him to a police station, brutalized him, and brought him back to the scene when he was dead. Now, the youth then stood up, the colleagues at the university stood up calling for answers, joined by other youth across the country, and raised the issue of police brutality in the country, which had been a thorn in the flesh for quite some time now. And this call was then joined by 3 members of parliament who felt that the issue is not being addressed because the people of the country do not have a prime minister that they elect. You will know that in Eswatini we do not have multi-party democracy. We have a democracy of direct representation where people elect their member of parliament directly to parliament, and the prime minister is then appointed from parliament by His Majesty the King. So they felt they do not have control in terms of getting him to act on issues affecting members of the public, such as police brutality, among many others, and then decided to go and call for a change. When they raised this in Parliament, however, the three MPs were chastised by their colleagues and labelled sellouts for raising a matter of constitutional importance outside the chambers. Now, this angered the youth, who then reacted with a host of petitions to the constituencies, and more than 50 petitions have been delivered of the 59 constituencies that we have in the country, before government decided to ban the delivery of petitions. And this raised the anger, and shortly thereafter they began mass protests, and in the process there was looting, and in the process structures were burnt and vehicles were torched, and then police had to come in together with the army and to break up this violence that had now erupted throughout the country. And during this curbing of the violence, several people have died. There are various numbers of people said to have died. The exact figure is unknown yet, with some claiming 80, government arguing only 34, and we have only been able to confirm at least 32 by getting in touch with the exact family members of those said to have died during this breakout of violence. Ever since, we've had more protests following that. The three MPs, warrants of arrest were then issued for these MPs for inciting violence around the country. One of the MPs managed to escape. The other two were arrested and they're still incarcerated. They have been denied bail, and this has also then prompted more protests calling for their release throughout the country, and schools have recently joined in this call, especially the schools in which that member of parliament comes from. And then since then, there's been also organizations that have also come up to say they do not support the calls for change and want the status quo to remain. They want the monarchy to remain. They want the king's powers to remain. And these two organizations are most recent. And then what we've also seen is that members of the transport sector, the kumbis and the buses, then joined in the strike as well. And they are calling for the release of the members of parliament, amongst other issues affecting them as a transport institution. Their strike lasted 8 days, and it was just only suspended last week. And they say temporarily they will revive the strike once in a while. And during this strike, a bus conductor was shot. And then last week, Wednesday, we had civil servants taking onto the streets, wanting to march to government on salary review talks. But this march was banned, despite being given permission by the city council, was banned at the last minute by the Commissioner of Police. Now this then prompted them to defy this ban, and proceeded, only to be met by police firing tear gas, firing rubber bullets, and some live rounds in some cases. This also saw a bus conductor and a pupil becoming the latest victims of the shootings, and they succumbed to their injuries. They also had 2 nurses left in intensive care unit, and this has caused nurses to resolve not to treat police officers and soldiers or their known relatives when they come to hospitals. They also down tools from 3 major hospitals, but we have been told that 2 of the hospitals are now back operating and treating patients, but 1 is still adamant that they want answers before they could go back to full service to the public. South African president, who's the chairperson of SADC Troika, Cyril Ramaphosa, last week sent an envoy, Jeff Radebe, into the country to try and broker peace and resolve the ongoing conflict. He met with the multi-stakeholder forum, he met with the king, he met with government officials. The media was left out, unfortunately, despite being a key stakeholder. And then following these consultations, the king has announced a dialogue for next year, which is going to take place after the Ingwala ceremony, which is in January, which takes place between now and January. So these talks may happen anytime from February. However, this period has not gone down well with the calls for change proponents, and they feel it's too far away. They want an immediate dialogue, and they also want an independent, preferably international mediator to facilitate the dialogue. They also want the dialogue at a neutral venue. They also, as a precondition, want the unbanning of the political parties, so to give them legitimacy in representation at the talks. And they want the return of political exiles, including the release of the 2 incarcerated members of parliament. They also feel there should be a transitional authority and a new democratic constitution, among other preconditions for the dialogue. However, the King's office says it sees no impediment to the national dialogue, as the process and venue are enshrined in the Constitution. So we do expect that the ongoing situation may prevail with regards to the debate around the actual venue, the debate around the facilitation of this dialogue, and that will only be known if government decides to listen to these calls by these proponents for change. If not, we will see a wait until the January end of Ingwala ceremony, and then the engagements that may take place thereafter sometime early next year. I thank you.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. It's time for us to dive straight into your economic news stories. And we start off in South Africa as Eskom and City Power working to end load shedding in Johannesburg. The city of Johannesburg will continue load shedding for the foreseeable future, despite requests to be excluded from Eskom's Stage 1 and Stage 2 load shedding at a national level. This follows a statement from Municipal Power Utility City Power at the weekend, rejecting the latest round of load shedding in the city. In a joint statement on Monday, the city of Johannesburg and Eskom said that they would continue searching for a lasting solution. Eskom resumed Stage 2 load shedding, which will continue on Monday, 25 October. That was yesterday. Smartphone users can download the app Eskom Se Push to receive push notifications when load shedding is implemented, as well as the times the area you are in will be off.
Development Bank financials indicates core stability, but high risk remains. The Development Bank of South Africa received a clean audit report from the Auditor General for the financial year ended 31 March 2021. Its net profit for the year increased to 1.4 billion rand. Total comprehensive income after adjustments for gains, losses, and unrealized and cash flow hedges and and other minor adjustment was 1.6 billion rand for the year. The financial year ended with a positive cash and cash equivalent balance of 9 billion. 2020, which was 3.5 billion rand. The bank balances the dual mandate of achieving development impact and financial stability.
Nigeria to launch digital currency, central bank says. Nigeria will launch a digital currency, the e-Naira, the central bank said, months after it barred banks and financial institutions from dealing in or facilitating transactions in cryptocurrencies. The e-Naira therefore marks a major step forward in the evolution of money, and the CBN is committed to ensuring that the e-Naira, like the physical Naira, is accessible to everyone, the bank said in a statement. Nigeria has named Barbados-based Bit Inc. as a technical partner in developing the e-Naira. All right, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. You know what comes up next? Economic indicators. Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. It's time for us to get into your sports news updates. And we start off in the world of cricket as Baba Rizwan star as Pakistan break India jinx with 10 wickets rout. Captain Baba Azam and Mohammad Rizwan hit half centuries as Pakistan hammered India by 10 wickets to register their first ever win over their arch rivals at 2020 World Cup in Dubai on Sunday. Chasing 152 for victory, Baba 68 and Rizwan 79 took apart the Indian bowling as they steered their team home with 13 balls to spare in Dubai. This is the first time we've beaten India and I feel proud, said Afridi. Afridi struck the first blow with an express delivery that swung in to trap Rohit Sharma LBW for a first ball duck, and the bowler celebrated with his trademark open arm gesture. We did not execute the things we wanted to, but credit is certainly due. They outplayed us today, admitted Kohli.
Solskjaer hanging on after United historic humiliation. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said he has come too far as Manchester United manager to give up now, but a 5-0 thrashing at home to Liverpool on Sunday left the Red Devils back where the Norwegian reign began. Solskjaer is yet to win a trophy as United boss, but has been credited with finishing the Premier League top 4 in consecutive season for the first time since Alex Ferguson retired as manager in 2013. Rather than take the next step to challenge Chelsea, Liverpool and Manchester City for the first title since 2013, United have, in Solskjaer's own words, hit a brick wall. A run of 1 point from a possible 12 has Solskjaer's men down in the 7th and already 8th point of the race for the title after just 9 games.
Stay strong, my Manchester United friends. What a tough week. All right, rugby. United Rugby Championships weekend of upsets leaves Leinster alone at the top. The chasing pack got what they were hoping for in 2 of the 3 games featuring Irish provinces in this past weekend's 5th round of the Vodacom United Rugby Championship. Ulster led the table heading into the weekend and now dropped to 2nd after their unexpectedly one-sided loss to Connacht at Aviva Stadium. Edinburgh scored a good away win against Zebre Parma to move into 4th position on the log table, while Ospreys are now 5th, 7 points behind the leaders. The South African teams did not play this weekend, so the best placed local team, the DHL Stormers, moved from 10th to 12th, but of course they now have a game in hand.
Alaska Stars as Sri Lanka defeat Bangladesh in feisty clash. Sri Lanka defeated Bangladesh by 5 wickets in a feisty T20 World Cup clash in Sra on Sunday, hammering home their status as surprise title contenders. Chasing an imposing target of 172, the 2014 championship saw Sharita Alaska and Banuka Japaska lead them to victory for a 4th successive win after 3 triumphs in the qualifying round. I am happy to hit a winning knock for my country, said Alaska, who got a winning run of a boundary with 7 balls to spare.
That brings us to the end of our sports news updates. After the break, we'll be back with your headlines. Africa Good Morning has been streaming live from 7 a.m., bringing you the news and current affairs happening in the SADC region and beyond. Now, if you perhaps missed our top stories at the top of the hour, or if you need a recap, worry not, here are the headlines. Sudan's military dissolves civilian government and arrests leaders. Islamic State claims responsibility for bomb attack in Uganda. Army launches airstrikes outside Tigray capital. Mali tells UN election date will be confirmed after December talks. Eskom and City Power working to end load shedding in Johannesburg. And in sports, Baba Rizwan star as Pakistan break India jinx with 10-wicket rout. Those have been our stories.
We thank you very much for joining us on the Tuesday edition of Africa Good Morning. We encourage you to visit our website. It's called One Up To, and here is the schedule of when you can expect your favorite show to air. We do welcome your remarks regarding our show. You can email them to us. Our email is agm_2centsworth@nmh.com.na. Alternatively, we are on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Africa Good Morning. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. We encourage you to get vaccinated, wear your mask, and avoid unnecessary public gatherings. And on that note, it's all our love, all our light.
Until tomorrow, Swera Shakanaka.